let's look at the domestic commodities market. The Nigerian government plans to place a final ban on the importation of tomato paste before the end of 2019 in order to encourage local production. The federal government has set aside about 250 billion naira through the Central Bank of Nigeria and Bank of Agriculture to disburse as soft loans to tomato farmers as part of the Anchor Borrowers Scheme. Well, let's look at this development with one of the research analysts with financial derivatives company, Desola Sumoni, joining us all the way from the University of Reading in the UK. Good afternoon, Desola. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Good afternoon, Chimeze. Thank you very much for having me.
So globally, the issue of protectionism is seen as a lag for global economic growth. Now, here in Africa, we talk about free trade agreement. Okay, free trade agreement on one hand, protectionism on the other hand. What's your take on this whole plan of banning importation of tomato paste?
First, it doesn't come as a surprise. Since this administration has come into power, they have consistently maintained self-sufficiency mantra and protectionist stance. We can see that in the federal government refusing to sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We can see that in the federal government refusing to sign the economic partnership agreement with the EU. We can also see that in the federal government, imposing levies and fines on the importation of some commodities such as, rice and tomato. Now, whether or not importation protectionism is an optimal policy choice for Nigeria now is up for debate. But in my view, I think that I'm a proponent of free trade. I'm a proponent of comparative advantage. I'm of the view that every country should produce a commodity in which they have comparative advantage in, and they should trade. Now, bringing it down to your question of the ban on tomatoes, let me just give you some background and some statistics. Tomato and tomato paste are part of the 41 items that are ineligible to obtain a foreign exchange at the central bank window. And as part of the federal government's new tomato policy, importers of tomato paste are required to, pay $1,500 per ton on tomato paste imported, and the tariffs of tomato have also been increased from 5% to 50%. All of this is in an attempt to discourage importation of tomato. But what do we see? We see in our markets today imported tomatoes everywhere. And why is that? Again, let me give you some statistics. The estimated Nigeria consumes on average about 2.3 million metric tons of tomatoes annually. Meanwhile, production is about 1.8 million metric tons. Already you can see a demand-supply mismatch there. In addition to that, about 45% of the domestically produced tomatoes does not make it to the market or the dinner table because they are destroyed. They're destroyed in transit. So with this huge supply shortfall, and you hear now that the federal government wants to ban the importation of tomato paste, you now begin to wonder, like, what do they expect to happen and what's the rationale behind this policy? I'm of the view that is not the optimal policy choice at this moment, and Nigeria is not ready to become self-sufficient in tomato production. Although we have the potential, but a lot of things need to be in place first.
So how do you think this development will affect the price of fresh tomatoes and tomato byproducts in Nigeria?
Assuming that we have strong border controls, right, and tomato importation is banned, right, then we are going to see the price of tomato, fresh tomatoes and tomato pastes increase. I'll give you an example. Look, Nigeria has one of the lowest tomato yields in the world at about less than 6 tons per harvested area. Meanwhile, the global average is about 38 tons per harvested area. So, and to my knowledge, there are only about 3 tomato processing plants in Nigeria, Dangote and a few others. So if tomato is banned, then if tomato importation is banned, then how does Nigeria seek to fill the supply deficit? So I think that's definitely going to cause prices to jump. I think also that smuggling would increase because we know that the borders are not properly manned. I mean, the last year when Nigeria increased the tariffs on rice to about 70%, we saw in Benin Republic that the rice importation increased by almost 100%, such that even per capita rice importation in Benin was about 160 kg per person. So what that simply meant was that Benin Republic was importing the rice, but we're smuggling it into Nigeria. So I think first price will jump up, smuggling would increase, and the federal government will unknowingly create monopolies and oligopolies, which will now begin to influence the price of tomato and tomato paste in the country.
Okay, Desola, I'm sure we would have more time to talk about this in future. Thank you very much for your time, Desola Simoni.